What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to my F122 My Team career mode. We have a special one here for episode 10 of our first season of F1. We are going to the Austrian Grand Prix this weekend at the Red Bull Ring, and we are set for another exciting weekend as it is our second sprint race weekend, I believe. And if you remember back to our first sprint race weekend, it went about as badly as it could, as we suffered a lot of damage in the sprint race. And then we end up actually being taken out by the reigning World Drivers Champion, Max Verstappen, in the full race. As we look forward here, actually, we're setting our R&D for the week. If you saw our last episode, we saw that we had a lot already undergoing, and so there's not a whole lot for us to do. As we actually get a couple of upgrades to come through, we're going to try and make sure to have R&D always running here, so we're not missing out on any opportunities. And speaking on not missing out on any opportunities, we finally get an opportunity to get our second sponsor of the team, and so we're going to go through and try and decide what, the good balance between income and reasonable weekly goals as it will. And so we're trying to find our best balance between them, and we will end up going with opaque, which just is simply a qualify in P15 or better with a weekly income of 100k and a gold bonus of 135k. That definitely seems like a pretty doable task ahead. So as we get ready for our Pirelli hot lap to do some autocross, we are going to be heading into Austria with a new goal of qualifying in P15 or above for our new sponsor. So as we head through our autocross event here for Pirelli, just another easy 100k in the bank, as well as that 1,000 driver acclaim. It really goes a long way. I think I'm getting better and better at these autocross events. I think when I first started playing this Pirelli hot lap was definitely my least favorite, and I think that kind of just boiled down to my lack of car control more than anything. So I think with a lot of things in this game, we are going to slightly start getting better and better the more we do these, and so I'm becoming less and less worried about trying to complete these Pirelli hot lap events. So we're going to finish up, get through here this starting line, get our cool $100,000 as well as our 1,000 driver claim, and we are going to move on towards our first qualifying session of Austria for these. So similarly to how we did qualifying in the previous episode at Silverstone, we're going to be showing our ending of our best laps of each qualifying session. And right here we are trying to move up and continue to stay out of the bottom 5 of the grid here in Q1 to move on towards our second Q2 of the series in a row. If you remember, in Silverstone, we ended up going into Q3 and qualifying in the top 10. As you currently see, we are running currently in P8, but we do not expect that to really hold here, especially as we get down to the last few moments and last laps of Q1, as we're trying to do our best to set the best time that we can. As we come here around the final corner, we will end up coming in over a full second down in our main qualifying. We actually go fastest in Q1 for now. I believe we end up getting beaten out at the end of Q1, but it's interesting to see us actually go fastest around the Red Bull Ring, which is something we were not expecting. And so we move forward into Q2, making it pretty comfortably there as we hit the fastest in Q1. And you can see here we are currently still running in P4 in this Q2 session. And I think this was our second sign that even though we did, it really should not have counted with those track limits, but unlike real life, track limits are not a problem here. But as I mentioned in our last episode, we are continuing to work on our AI difficulty settings for this series, and so currently we had increased it from our previous episode, but unfortunately it looks like we still have a bit more to go. But it definitely is a little bit harder, but qualifying is going a little bit better, as in the end of Q3 we qualify in P10, which is probably about where we should be compared to the rest of Q10, P10 in terms of the rest of the top 10 qualifiers. So we still have a few adjustments to make, but we are not going to complain, as we will be starting in P10 for the start of our weekend in the sprint race in Austria. And so as we finish up our last practice session, we are heading to the sprint race, in which we are seeing a wet sprint race similar to how we were in Imola, and so we are feeling a little bit nervous as we head to another wet sprint race here in this F122 My Team career, as we go to the formation lap of the sprint race. And our goal here, kind of similar to how we were in Silverstone last week, is to try and defend as best as possible and try and put ourselves into a position to make something happen tomorrow at the full Grand Prix weekend comes to a close. So we are just trying to focus on potentially being opportunistic and hoping that the rain truly is the great equalizer that many people say it is. So even though we are currently running an AI difficulty that probably is a little bit too low for our current position, we are not going to complain after I keep harping on them. But those last few episodes before episode 9, I think it was episode 7 and 8, were just absolutely disastrous. And so here we are in Austria around the Red Bull Ring, which is actually a track I had more experience on as I played some of the weekly events when the real life F1 grid went to Austria. So I think this is going to be a good opportunity as we head to 5 red lights for the sprint race here at the Red Bull Ring. The lights are out and we are away. We actually get a pretty decent start compared to the rest of the field. I think our starts have definitely gotten a little bit better as we actually get taken by the Williams on the inside. We are going to round turn 1, hopefully not making any mistakes, and I think we avoided most contact as the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc is darting out to the front of the pack, quickly pulling away from the rest of the grid. And it's the Red Bull who makes a huge dive down the inside. We get a little comfortable there with the Alfa Romeo on the inside line, and we'll back it up here a little bit to kind of see exactly what happened in that corner, because we saw a lot happen. We're coming down following Max Verstappen, who makes a huge dive up the inside here, and we try and follow him through as best we can, kind of rubbing wheels with Valtteri Bottas and Daniel Ricciardo on the full outside. We get a little bit of a warning with our collision with Bottas, probably a bit of too much of a lunge to the inside there, but we try and get the move done as we're going wheel to wheel down here into the corner. We're hoping to be last on the brakes. We take that inside line and we get the move done on the Alfa Romeo, slotting in behind our old friend Daniel Ricciardo. If you remember from our last episode, we got to see a lot of this angle of the McLaren, and we're hoping to avoid something similar happening today in the Red Bull Ring. So as you can see, we actually start on the slicks, as it has yet to truly become a wet race here around the Red Bull Ring. And so we are curious to see and hoping to get a close eye on the weather as this race develops, as we come home and finish our first lap. Keeping an eye on the weather is definitely going to be a very important thing for us as we will move forward here to lap 3, towards the end of lap 3. We actually see our first retirement as Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri is out of this sprint race. Unfortunately, not enough to draw a full safety car, it would seem. So as we come down here to turn 1, trying to make up ground as Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen, we get a little squirrely at 2-1. The other AlphaTauri of Yuki Tsunoda also out of this race, and that will indeed bring out the safety car, and we will have to slow it right down. Just a few laps into this sprint race, about a third of the way in, and we are stuck behind a safety car for now. And slowly but surely and very quickly here, we will see that the weather is about to make a large shift that will really affect the rest of this race. As we get ready to jump forward here, we're not going to make this watch us going around in circles behind the safety car. As you can see here, the raindrops are starting to fall on this race restart as we are getting a decent jump here on the McLaren. We're going to make a big move down the inside, probably a little early on the brakes, take a bit of a tight line. We're lucky not to get any damage there, and we are up into 7th position after sending a bit of a kamikaze dive down the inside of the McLaren. And for once, we're getting a little bit of payback on him leaving us in the absolute dust in Silverstone last week, and we now find ourselves on the bumper of the front group and the Red Bull of Max Verstappen. We're getting a bit of a weather update. It does look like the rain is going to intensify soon, and so we are once again and absolutely trying to make the best early decision as possible as we actually get the call here. It's time to come in. It's time for inters. The rain is getting a little too much, and slicks are going to get very dangerous here in a moment as we are nearing the 2/3 mark here of lap 7 of this trip around the Red Bull Ring. And this is where we truly see some carnage begin as we make our way around the final few bends, trying not to make any major mistakes with this wet conditions on these used medium tires. And it looks as though a good majority of the group ahead also makes the decision to pit for inters, but there actually are a few who decide to stay out and try and brave one more lap, going for a bit of an overcut potentially to take advantage of one more potentially dry lap as we come in here, get an optimal turn in. Hopefully there's no issues, and there is not, as we get a 2.3 second stop. We still come out behind Verstappen and we come out in P9. as we will try and make the most of these new inters as we make our way around. And I think this is going to be an interesting last 4 laps, to say the least, as we know how hard it is to get some heat in these tires, and then you throw in the fact of the weather and the rain. I think it can cause a bit of carnage. As you see here, we actually get a little late into the braking and actually struggle to get the car stopped and turned in. We lose a little bit of time, and by a little bit of time I mean a lot of time, to the Red Bull ahead. So as we come down here this back straight, we actually get to see Max Verstappen make a mistake and spins out, and we avoid the carnage that actually will come in behind us. And if you will see something very interesting happen here, as we see another safety car deployed 4 laps before the end of this race. Wonder what happened as our teammate Fittipaldi is out of this sprint race. I think he gets caught up in the traffic jam. Let's go ahead and take a look back and see exactly what happened with Max Verstappen's spin. I think he gets on the curb here a little too early on the gas, and we luckily managed to get around him. But you can see the lineup that develops behind Max Verstappen, and you can see in the back Fittipaldi just going a little too quickly, and all of a sudden our teammate is out of this Austrian sprint race here. As we'll back it up and we'll take one more look at exactly what happened here on this first lap on the inters. For a lot of these drivers, Max Verstappen spins, the AI can't seem to handle it. As you'll see here, we managed to luckily avoid it, but George Russell, Valtteri Bottas, and the rest of the pack just cannot seem to get it stopped in time on these cold tires. And there we see Fittipaldi just taking it up the rear from Lewis Hamilton, and Fittipaldi is out of this Austrian sprint race. And here is the next moment of absolute carnage. After this safety car, the rest of the field who had yet to pit for inters pits now, and here we see exactly the craziest thing we've seen so far. Is as we pass the pit lane, we actually find ourselves in P3 of this sprint race, and we're so surprised at that. We get a little squirrely out of turn 1 as we are just continuing to make our way around the safety car. And as we currently sit in P3, we are looking at a potential top 3 finish and a top 3 start in tomorrow's Grand Prix for the first time, due to the weather changing and us making the early pit stop and deciding not to stay out with the rest of the pack. And because of this safety car, we are going to get another lap behind the safety car at least, and we are looking to potentially only have to defend from the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc for maybe a maximum of a couple laps. And if we can do that, we may be looking at a top 3 finish in the Austrian sprint race. And it is amazing, the AI making these kinds of mistakes, but we are definitely going to be there to take advantage if we can. Max Verstappen spinning coming out of this corner that we just passed absolutely changes the weekend for us, as we currently find ourselves in a top 3 behind the McLaren of Lando Norris and the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. At this point, no indication of the safety car coming in this lap, and we may potentially get 2 full laps to defend from Charles Leclerc and to finish as high up as we can. As we come down these final couple of turns, we will get closer and closer to our opportunity to finish inexplicably in the top 3, as the safety car is in here on lap 10, about to start lap 11, our final 2 laps of this Austrian sprint race. We get an amazing jump here on Lando Norris. We actually use as much ERS as we can handle, a little early on the brakes not to get out of sorts. We kind of give him a bit of bump there to the inside, kind of close the door as much as we can, and now here we are in P2 of this Austrian sprint race, and we have to do everything in our power to defend from the rest of the grid, as we are only behind the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. We know we have 0 chance to catch this Ferrari, as they have shown time and time again that the performance of the Ferrari is just so far and above us that there's absolutely no chance. So at this point, we are going to defend like mad, or as Fernando Alonso would ask us, to defend like a lion, and trying to hold off the McLaren of Lando Norris, and now actually George Russell, who has actually passed the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. And we are doing our dangdest to try and start on the front row of our first Grand Prix, thanks to an absolutely inexplicable mistake by the Red Bull of Max Verstappen, as well as the questionable decision making by everyone who decided not to pit on the first entry for inters as the rain started to fall. And here we are starting our last lap of this Austrian sprint race. We have just a few corners to defend from, and we will be starting on the front row next to the Ferrari in the Austrian Grand Prix tomorrow. What an absolutely bonkers universe we have set up here that I'm almost speechless at exactly how this happened. I never expected to be here, even qualifying in P10. I was just hoping for a top 10 start on the grid for the next day, but here we are finding ourselves on the front row if things hold serve as of right now, and we are on our way here as we've actually opened up a bit of a gap to now Russell behind. I think he and Norris fighting behind us has opened up a bit of a gap, and as long as we don't bend it here, we will be starting on the front row, and that is absolutely insane as we finally managed to get our first really good result here in our F1 22 career. We have a couple of points finishes, but nothing like this. As we round these final two corners, we will be on our way to the best result and almost doubling our World Drivers' Championship and Constructors' points as we round the final corner. Mr. Dakota Zero Racing heads to the finish line, takes the checkered flag, and will start on the front row of the Austrian Grand Prix tomorrow. What a result, what a race, and what an exciting start to the weekend. I can't wait to see what happened here as Sebastian Vettel gets driver of the day here in the sprint race. I feel like I got a bit snubbed here on driver of the day, starting P10 and finishing P2 in our car, in this team, in this year. It seems like it would be worthy of a driver of the day, but nonetheless, we secure 7 points in the sprint race, almost doubling our amount of points our team has in the constructors, as well as almost doubling the amount of points I have on the season, which currently sit at 8. Adding 7 more, we move up to 15 total points, and that is going to go a long way as we try and claw our way up the bottom of the pack here in this fantasy F1 season. Unfortunately, Fittipaldi was unfortunately had to DNF out of the race with that Max Verstappen pileup. And so as we prepare here to start on the front row, we are going to have to focus up more than I think we ever have before, as it is going to be a tall task to defend against the rest of this field as we do everything possible to try and secure the best position. I don't think it's reasonable to expect a podium here. Our car just does not have that kind of performance, but nonetheless, we are going to do our best to secure the best position that we can, and much we can, and we are going to head now into the Austrian Grand Prix.
Welcome from the beautiful Styrian Mountains for another chapter in the story of the Austrian Grand Prix. The Spielberg circuit then is situated 700 metres above sea level, with just 10 corners making up one of the shortest laps of the season. One time around here is a distance of around 2.6 miles, with the best overtaking chances into turn 1 or the tight uphill of turn 3. It's time to see how our drivers are stacking up after yesterday's exciting qualifying session. An immense lap from Carlos Sainz yesterday puts him in pole position, and the rookie completes the front row. Considering the rest of the grid, we have Russell, Norris, Charles Leclerc, and Bottas, Vettel, Magnussen, Joe, and Daniel Ricciardo, Albon, Verstappen, Fernando Alonso, and Perez, Stroll, Mick Schumacher, Esteban Ocon, and Lewis Hamilton, Latifi, Fittipaldi, Gasly, they've taken a grid penalty, and Yuki Tsunoda. And with lights out just moments away, it's time to go down to the track. Now I want...
So as we line up for our formation lap here on a nice sunny day in Austria around the Red Bull Ring, we are going to once again reiterate our goal here and how absolutely wild it is here to find ourselves in P2 on the starting grid here in Austria around the Red Bull Ring. It is going to be a very difficult job here to defend from the Mercedes behind of George Russell as well as the McLaren of Lando Norris. They absolutely should have the pace advantage against us around here, as our car definitely does not have the mechanical ability to do enough but we are going to try and place our car as best we can and try and make up the difference ourselves to get the best result possible here. We are trying to be a little more reasonable and a little more measured in our expectations here around the Red Bull Ring, knowing that we probably aren't going to be looking at a podium here. I think at this point we are going to be trying and limit damage as long as possible, as well as just trying to get the best we can. So as our formation lap finishes here, all 22 cars lined up, we are heading to 5 red lights, 36 laps around the Red Bull Ring. Here we go, the lights are out and we are away here in Austria, as we actually get a really good start here, but that Ferrari absolutely sending one up on us, and we are going to be unable to make up any positions here. Actually, Sainz starting on the soft compound tire, and so this was a moment where I realized that should things continue on, we are going to be looking at potentially, if we can actually manage to hold on to this second place, at one point we will be leading the Austrian Grand Prix, as Sainz will surely have to pit before us on those soft compound tires. And so we are going to have even more motivation here, even if it doesn't stick, to be leading our first Grand Prix here, as we would inherit the lead from the Sainz pit stop. You can see that we're a little bit nervous here and a little bit jumpy as we're trying to do our best to keep the racing line, just try and stay smooth and measured, while also not succumbing to the nerves, the aforementioned nerves of leading our first Grand Prix here in a bit. So as we finish up our first couple of laps and our first lap here, the last couple of corners, Sainz has absolutely left us in the dust. And I can only imagine how much the McLaren of Lando Norris and the other Ferrari of Charles Leclerc is absolutely detesting us, as we are going to do everything here to break the toe of Lando Norris and try and do everything we can to hold on to this second position. I know they have to be absolutely fuming at the idea of being stuck behind us, kind of similar to Alonso a couple of weeks ago around Monaco, where he held up effectively the entire grid. So we are going to be trying to emulate something similar here, trying to hold on as long as possible, and I guess doing Carlos Sainz here a bit of a favor, as we get an unfortunate message from our engineer here on lap 2. Our component wear is starting to get a little too high, and so we were told to expect a bit of a performance issue here, which is not something you want to hear when you're currently running in P2 in the Austrian Grand Prix. As we jump forward here to lap 7, we do find ourselves still in P2, now defending immediately from the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, kind of creating our own little bubble, similar to how we had with Daniel Ricciardo in the last episode. But we know that that Ferrari absolutely has the pace on us, and so we're going to do everything we can to defend this inside line, coming around this final corner to do everything we can, deploying all of our ERS and kind of pushing him a little bit wide, probably getting a little dirty here. We kind of squeeze him out just a little too much. We push him back into Lando Norris, and hopefully they can start fighting a little bit more and kind of give us a bit more of a bubble. I know it's not the cleanest racing we've ever seen, but we are doing everything we can here to try and hold on to our second lap, or our second position here, as Kevin Magnussen in the Haas is out of the Austrian Grand Prix here in lap 8. Unfortunate for the Haas, definitely a bit of unlucky runnings there for K-Mag. As we continue on here, we are always watching our rear view mirror, trying not to give any unnecessary toes to the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc behind us. We are doing everything we can to slow down as much as possible those behind us, to try and give ourselves every opportunity to stay in P2 here as we move forward to the beginning of lap 9. And there it is, Carlos Sainz pits at the end of lap 8, and we inherit the lead, and we currently lead the Austrian Grand Prix, our first time in P1 here, as we are doing our best to do whatever we can. As George Russell makes his way up into P2, we round turn 3 on this back straight, hoping that the Ferrari and the Mercedes will fight just enough to give us a bit of an opportunity to get away and create our own little bubble running in clean air here. But we also know that our tires are going to be degrading much faster than those behind us, as our car setup and driver lines are going to be subpar to those behind us. And so we are going to be doing everything we can to generate a bubble, but not pushing too hard as to degrade our tires even faster here, as towards the end of lap 11, Charles Leclerc is making a bit more of a run on us once again on these final 2 corners. Kind of squeeze him out a bit of the inside, but he is definitely on our rear bumper here, as we are going to try and break the toe as best we can. And Charles actually gets, not sure exactly what happened behind us, but all of a sudden there's a McLaren behind us, as Lando Norris gets a fantastic run on Charles Leclerc there apparently. who had a bit of an issue, and you can see here that our underbody is taking a fair bit of damage at this point, unfortunately, taking lines a little too tight, incurring some underbody damage, and it's at this point that that damage in our tire wear starts to catch up to us, as Lando Norris now leads the Austrian Grand Prix, and we are trying to do our best to hold on to the back of him as best we can, potentially looking to make some moves here, try and regain P1, maybe going a bit on the inside, but unfortunately he covers us off pretty well, and we are going to be just at this point, we are accepting our fate that we, with our current tire status as well as that underbody damage, we are going to just be trying to hold on to the back of the McLaren as long as possible, trying to have him give us a bit of a tow out and away from the next pack. But Charles Leclerc has absolutely no intentions of falling back into the hands of the Mercedes, and he is giving us another fantastic battle here as we are trying to stay in the podium places as we finish up the midway point, as we start, I guess I should say, the midway point in this race. We started in P2, we are currently running in P2, and after leading the race for a handful of laps, we find ourselves back right where we started, defending from a different Ferrari and looking at the back of a McLaren, but this time of Lando Norris. So as we make our way down this inexplicable turn, whatever they would call it, turn 2, we will move forward here to the end of lap 14, and is actually now Sergio Perez of the Red Bull team who has made his way up into P3 and is chasing us down, who I know he will absolutely have no issue trying to make his way past our subpar car, and we are at this point are not going to be fighting it that much, as our engine wear and underbody damage and everything else that's happening as we get a bit wide and a bit squirrely out of turn 3, maybe trying to get a little too late on the brakes, and the Red Bull will absolutely pull out away from us as the Mercedes also has his run at us. We kind of give him a bit of a squeeze here to the inside as we try and hold on to this inside line to try and get a better exit here. We actually managed to hold off George Russell for one more moment as we get a bit of a run down here onto this twistier section. You'll see a lot less overtaking here, and so we are trying to take advantage of that the best we can, but we defend from the Mercedes once again, and now we find another familiar foe, Charles Leclerc, once again behind us, who's hopefully, I'm saying this a lot, hopefully he'll battle with George Russell enough to continue to give us an opportunity to kind of pull away. And at this point, we are definitely trying to employ the same strategy we did with Lando, trying to do everything we can to hold on to the back of the Red Bull, but it is at this point that we miss out on the DRS, and we will fall into the hands of the Ferrari as we run a bit wide here on turn 1. We get a warning for exceeding track limits. Probably should have had a few more at this point in the race, but once again we managed to get through. I don't know if Charles had a bit of an issue coming out of that turn 1 behind us, but we find ourselves now with a bit of a second cushion on either side as we are currently working on our push lap towards our first pit stop of the day. Our engine wear is up there, our underbody damage is severe. We are feeling that ever more and ever more, as we currently at this point, over halfway through the race with 20 laps remaining, find ourselves still in the podium positions, and we are doing everything we can to keep it that way as long as possible, as we now find ourselves with a 2-second gap cushion behind us to the Ferrari, and we are going to try and do everything we can to extend that as best we can into here, the final corner before our first pit stop of the day, and hoping that we'll run into no issues and we'll be able to get back out there and continue to fight for what would be our best results ever as a Formula One team. So as we make our way down the pit straight, we'll see more than a few others also pitting behind us. We'll see that George Russell and Carlos Sainz move out and stay out, and they will continue on for another lap or two before they make their pit stop, attempting a bit of an overcut on the pack ahead. So as we exit the pit lane, our new goal here is warm up these tires as best as possible as we actually come out right behind the Alpine of Esteban Ocon. And it's now time to get these tires lit up and get on our way. Moving forward a couple of laps here, the group who decided to stay out instead of pitting after their first medium stint have done so, and we now find ourselves in P4 behind the Red Bull of Sergio Perez and the McLaren of Lando Norris. And here is George Russell, who's finally has the position to send one up on us, and we don't really have a whole lot to say about that, as the Mercedes is just going to do whatever it wants to us at this point, especially now on these hard tires, which just are so much more difficult to get pointed in the right direction and having the same kind of performance as the medium compound tire. And so we find ourselves once again with the goal of holding on to the back of a much faster car ahead of us as we currently run in P5. But our old friend Charles Leclerc is right behind us once again, currently making his way up, closing that 1 second gap. And as soon as the Ferrari gets into that 1 second gap and is able to activate his DRS, we know that we are going to be sitting ducks in the hands of the Scuderia. And so at this point, we are doing everything we can to keep heat in these tires and trying to hold on to the back of George Russell, who at this point is going to unfortunately leave us in the dust. We do get DRS one more time, but I believe this is going to be the last time that we see the back of George Russell. And as we move forward here to lap 30, we find ourselves bound into P7, fighting our old foe Daniel Ricciardo in the other McLaren, who has made his way up and through. And unfortunately, it's definitely at this point that our underbody damage, and I believe at this point we also had some diffuser damage, that is really holding us back. And we are actually now fighting Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo as well. And we are currently staring down, after leading this Grand Prix not but 15 laps ago, are currently staring down the idea of a P9 finish here in Austria. And so we are going to once again deploy our tried and true strategy of holding on to the back of a faster car, defending from another car behind, and trying to do everything we can to finish off and get points in this Austrian Grand Prix. Now with only 5 laps remaining in this one, we are doing everything in our power to take every advantage we can, get every ounce of performance out of our damaged and dying car, with our engine components getting more and more wear every moment. And we move forward now once again to our final couple laps here in Austria. We find ourselves trailing Daniel Ricciardo by 3 seconds, and we find Valtteri Bottas and Lewis Hamilton, the former teammates at Mercedes, now fighting for those last 2 points positions. And we're hoping that they will continue to fight even more and slow themselves down even more, as we are really hoping to not have to fight the 7-time World Drivers Champion Lewis Hamilton once again, as we try and hold on to P8 here, closing in on our last lap beginning here. So we really need Valtteri Bottas to make up that half-second deficit and really get onto the rear bumper of the Mercedes, trying to do everything we can to get the car around and finish off a fantastic result for us. As we round the final corners, we head down the pit straight, try and break the toe of Lewis Hamilton as best we can. And yeah, this is now do or die as we turn into turn 1. The first opportunity for Lewis to make a bit of a run at us, and we get a pretty decent exit out of turn 1 using every little bit of ERS we have saved up, which is very little at this point. We're trying to do everything we can to build as much of a gap. Unfortunately, we were unable to get Lewis outside of DRS range, and so once again we are going to have to do everything in our power to defend against the far superior machine of the Mercedes. But fortunately for us, I think Valtteri got a bit of a good run out of turn 3 and kind of held Lewis up a little bit. And at this point we are doing everything in our power, and now running, like I was mentioning last episode, on the lowered traction control. We are doing everything we can to get onto the power, onto the brakes as smooth as possible, trying to avoid any unnecessary spins, as Sergio Perez comes home to win the Austrian Grand Prix. And we are in a fierce battle now with Lewis Hamilton trying to finish in P8 as Carlos Sainz actually crosses and takes fastest lap. We are going wheel to wheel with Lewis Hamilton, but as we round the final corner, deploying every bit of ERS, we will take the checkered flag to finish in P8. A fantastic result for us and a fantastic result for our racing team. It may not have gone as best as we could have had, but nonetheless, starting on the front row, finishing in the points, and an absolutely fantastic weekend for us in Austria, as we make significant leaps up both the drivers' standings as well as the constructors' championship. What an absolutely amazing weekend for us. We were lucky with weather, we were lucky with the mistakes of the AI, but nonetheless we are going to come home by more than doubling our previous amount of points on the season and bringing home a good amount of points as well as some good money going forward for us. What an absolutely amazing weekend. These are the weekends that we race for, and these are the weekends that, you know, make us motivated and strive for a better car, so we can try and, you know, pull out these kinds of weekends every weekend instead of being so few and far between. So an absolutely wonderful day as Lando Norris actually ends up on the podium. Checo Perez coming home with the win. Lando and Carlos Sainz making up the rest of the podium. What a day for them, as the big three, as I'll call it, actually stay off the podium of Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, and Max Verstappen end up off the podium. And what a weekend of surprises and intrigue, as we saw plenty of mistakes and plenty of opportunistic people. As we come home to look at the final results, we see George Russell finishing in P5. Charles ends up just outside the top 3 in P4. We actually come home on the weekend as a whole above Max Verstappen, which is an absolutely wild thing to say, as we make up 11 points in the Drivers and Constructors Championship. We get points in both events, and we could not be happier as we pull home 11 points, adding to our 8 already. We currently now stand with 9 points on the season for both the Drivers and Constructors Championship. So we'll take a look at the standings here. We now currently stand well alone in P11 for the Drivers, not necessarily fighting for the World Championship this year yet, but I think the thing that's going to be more important for us is the constructors standings, as we now move into P7 all alone, and now chasing the back of the Alfa Romeo team as we try and continue to make big pushes and strides up this leaderboard. It'll be a tough task to follow the Alfa up the standings, but we know that we can, with Alpine right there as well. If we can get a good run of results, we will slowly move up and we will reap the benefits thereof. But as we see our rivalry breakdown, Daniel actually beats us on the weekend, but nonetheless, we are going to be right there with him, and I could not be more excited to move forward here. We will get I believe, move up into our team acclaim of level 11, get to that extra acclaim boost. We'll finish off both of our sponsorships for the weekend, making another good amount of money, and we are looking forward to our next weekend out. But for now, I'll do it for me here, and I'll see you guys next time.